Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen and Barbara, for organizing such a nice conference to which I was really looking forward. My talk is about Abhari. Abhari is a Persian medieval logician and philosopher from 13th century. And today I want to discuss his solution to the liar paradox. I don't want to defend his solution, but I want to use some tools from modern logic to analyze his solution and to show that we can see Abhari as a proto-Buridanian, Albertian, figure. There is a nice paper previously published by David Sanson and Ahmed Al-Wisha, in which they had discussed Abhari's solution to the liar paradox, but their suggestion was that Abhari must be read as a proto-Bradwardinian figure. But I want to show, by appealing to some logical tools and some logical analysis, that basically Abhari's solution is very similar to what we have in Buridan or Albert. Besides that, I think basically our difference suggestion is because of different texts that we had discussed. In their paper, David Sanson and Ahmed Al-Wisha considers a text by Abhari called Tanzil al-Afkar, which was discussed by a later logician, Tusi. But in my presentation, I will consider some other works by Abhari and try to show that Abhari's solution is very similar to what we have in principle in Buridan. To start, we can consider that a liar sentence is a sentence which says of which that it is false. Basically, the liar sentence is a sentence which is equivalent to its falsity. We know in modern logic that if we add some other assumptions, then we have a paradox, or we have a contradiction there. The first, group of assumptions are the principles and laws of classical logic, like the principle of bivalence, excluded middle, and non-contradiction. The second assumption that we have is that the liar sentence is a well-formed truth-apt sentence. And the third assumption is that for every well-formed truth-apt sentence like X, X is true if and only if X is the case. And basically, the third assumption is what we know as Tarski truth schema. We know that if we have these three groups of assumptions, then we can produce a contradiction from a liar sentence by an argument which is very similar to what we have here. Based on the principle of, bivalence, we have the in the first line of this argument that the liar sentence is either true or false. And then we have, based on the truth schema, that the truth of L is equivalent to L. But according to the definition of the liar sentence, L is equivalent to the falsity of L. Based on 2 and 3, we can conclude that truth of L is equivalent to its falsity. And finally, from 1 and 4, we can conclude based on the principle of classical logic that L is both true and false. This shows that if we consider the conjunction of the rules of the classical logic, the well-formedness of the lawyer sentences and also the truth schema, then we have a contradiction. So to solve the liar paradox, we have one of the these three options. And based on these options, basically, we have three categories of three exhaustive categories of solutions for the liar paradox. The first group of solutions are those in which one or more of the principles of classical logic are rejected. The second group of solutions are the ones in which the well-formedness of the liar sentence is rejected. And the third group of solutions are those in which the truth schema is rejected and replaced by another, probably better schema, based on which we can see that the liar sentence is simply false. And I think based on these categorization, we can nicely categorize all the solutions that we have in the Arabic tradition, at least. And it is interesting that in the Arabic tradition, we have all these kinds of solutions. For example, from the first category, we have Abdul Qahir al-Baghdadi, a theologian contemporary to Avicenna, who believes that the principle of non-contradiction and the principle of bivalence are not universally true. He argues that every sentence is either true or false, except the liar sentence or the liar form sentences. And we have also a bit later Saad-ed-Din al-Taftazani, whose solution was really interesting. He again, rejects the principle of non-contradiction or bivalence in a way, and his discussion is very interesting because he uses the liar paradox to argue against the intrinsicness of goodness and badness, and to defend the divine command theory in ethics. Because interestingly, he says that if the goodness and badness of our actions are intrinsic to them, then the goodness and badness of saying a sentence would be intrinsic to that action or to that saying. So if we lie, then our action is intrinsically bad, and if we tell the truth, our action is intrinsically good. But if we say the liar sentence, we are doing two things. Telling the truth, and on the other hand, lying. So basically, we are doing two things, a good thing and a bad. And if goodness and badness of things are intrinsic to the actions, then we have kind of, ontological contradiction, because we have both goodness and badness at the same time in the same action, but it's not possible. It's interesting that Saad-ed-Din al-Taftazani in a way accepts contradiction at the level of semantic, because he believes that the liar sentence is actually both true and false, but he doesn't accept this contradiction at an ontological level, because he says that it's impossible to have an action that is both good and bad at the same time and to the same extent. And from the second group of solutions, basically this group of solutions form the main group of solutions that we have in medieval Arabic and Persian logic, because most of logicians that we know, they actually proposes a solution in this line. And there are many different arguments to show that the liar sentences actually are not well formed, and something in them is wrong, and because of that we cannot say that the liar sentence is either true or false. And finally, we have the third group of solutions by people like Aṭīr al-Abharī, Najmuddin al-Katibi al-Ghazwini, and Qutbuddin al-Shirazi. And I think all of these solutions are in one way or another go back to Aṭīr al-Abharī. And this is because this is why I have considered Abhari to discuss in this session. So I start by Abhari's different sentences, which he proposes, as the examples of the liar sentences. The first example that he discussed is that we can consider someone who has never said the truth in his life. And he says the sentence that all sentences that I say are false, and he dies. Basically, he wants to, describe a scenario for putting all the restrictions that we need to make the sentence, all sentences that I say are false, actually a liar sentence whose truth entails its falsity, and vice versa. Because if we consider this sentence, if it is true, then all the sentences that these people has said in his life would be false. And this sentence itself is one of those sentences, and it should be false as well. On the other hand, if we consider that this sentence is false, then given the assumption that all previous sentences that this person has said in his life are false, then this sentence would be false, must be true, and then we have truth from falsity and falsity from truth. Then he considers an objection, and he says that, okay, one might say that it's impossible to have such a person in the world. So he simplifies his example, and he says that, okay, we can suppose someone who enters a certain house, and he first expresses a false sentence, and then he says that all sentences that I say in this house are false, and then he left the house. And so again, he is putting some restrictions to make that sentence a real liar sentence. And finally, the simplest example is the sentence that all sentences that I say at this moment are false, and this moment refers to the sentence in which this sentence is said. But for the sake of simplicity, I stick to the first definition that I proposed, and in some of my discussions, I just consider that a liar sentence is a sentence of which it says that it is false. His presentation of the paradox is as following. One of the subtle fallacies is the conjunction of the two contradictories when someone says all sentences that I say at this moment is false. This sentence is either true or not. If it is true, then both its true and then both its truth and falsity are entailed. And if it is not true, then one of his sentences at this moment is true. This is necessary because of the existence of his sentences in the external world. That true sentence is not other than this sentence itself. This is because no other sentence exists at this moment. So the truth of this sentence is established. Thus, both the truth and falsity of this sentence are entailed. So his presentation of the paradox basically is like this, that if this sentence is true, then then all the sentences that are said by this person at this moment is false. Therefore, this sentence itself should be false. On the other hand, if this sentence is false, given the assumption that this person didn't say any other sentences, then therefore from the claim that there should exist at least one sentence that it is true, then we can conclude the truth of this sentence. So basically, from the truth, we have the falsity of the sentence, and from the falsity of the sentence, we have its truth. So if we want to propose a formal reconstruction of Abhari's presentation of the paradox, we can show his liar sentence as like this. Basically, he says that every sentence that is said by the liar is false. And he has a uniqueness assumption according to which the liar sentence is the only sentence that is said by the liar. So basically, his argument goes as follows: that the liar sentence is either true or false. From its truth, we have both its truth and falsity. And again, from its falsity, we have again the conjunction of its truth and falsity. So in any case, we have the conjunction of its truth and falsity. And we have the contradiction, so we have the paradox. As we see, Abhari's solution is that he accepts the second line of the argument, B. He accepts that the truth of the liar sentence entails the conjunction of its truth and falsity, but he rejects the third line, which says that the falsity of the liar sentence entails the conjunction of its truth and falsity. He doesn't himself provide an argument for B, for the line B, but basically it's very easy to see how this line can be established. We can assume the truth, the truth of the liar sentence as the antecedent of this conditional claim. Then, based on the Tarskian truth schema, we have the equivalence of the truth of L to L. So, based on the first two lines, we can conclude L. And based on the fact that we have here, L, the liar sentence is that every sentence that the liar says is false, then we can conclude this line. And based on the uniqueness assumption that no other sentences is said but the liar sentence, we can conclude this line. So we can conclude that the L is said by S. But we have here in line B4 that every sentence that is said by the liar is false. Therefore, we can conclude the falsity of L. So we have both truth and falsity of L, and we have the line B8, which says that from truth of from the assumption of the truth of the liar sentence, we can conclude the conjunction of its truth and falsity. But he discusses in detail the argument for C. Basically, what he proposes is very similar to what we have here as the argument C. Suppose that we have the falsity of L based on the truth schema. By negating both sides of the truth schema, we can, and the rules of the classical logic, we can arrive at this equivalence, and then we can conclude based on the first two lines the negation of L. And because we have here the definition of L, the negation of L would be this sentence C4. There is a sentence that is said by the liar and it is true. But because we have the uniqueness assumption, there is no other sentences that is said by the liar. Therefore, we should conclude that that sentences to which line C4 is referring is basically nothing except L itself. So we have the conjunction of the fact that L is said by the lawyer and also that L is true. Therefore, we can conclude the truth of L. It means that from the assumption of the falsity of L, we have concluded the truth of L. And so we have the conjunction of truth and falsity of L. And it means that, okay, we have from this, conditional claim that the falsity of L entails the conjunction of truth and falsity of L. But Abhari's solution for the liar paradox goes as follows. The solution to this fallacy is, as we say, we don't admit that if it is false, then it is entailed that one of his sentences is true. And this is because its truth consists of the conjunction of its truth and falsity. And the non-existence or negation of the conjunction of its truth and falsity does not entail that it is true. Basically, he is rejecting the argument C. He says that we don't accept that the falsity of the liar sentence entails the conjunction of its truth and falsity. Why? Because he says that to see what's the falsity of a sentence entails, we should first know what the truth of that sentence is. And he says that the truth of the liar sentence consists of or is equivalent to the conjunction of its truth and falsity. So if we want to know the falsity of the liar sentence, we should negate both sides of this equivalence. And if we do that, then we see that, okay, the falsity of the liar sentence is nothing but the disjunction of its truth and falsity. So from the falsity of the liar sentence, we cannot conclude its truth. What we can conclude is the disjunction of its truth and falsity. And basically, there is no problem for supposing that the liar sentence is false. Why does Abhari think that there is no paradox? As I said, Abhari accepts that the argument B, the argument which says that the truth of L entails the conjunction of its truth and falsity, holds. But he rejects that the argument C, which is the argument which says that the falsity of L entails the conjunction of its truth and falsity. Abhari says that this argument does not hold. And finally, he says that the truth of L consists of or is equivalent to the conjunction of its truth and falsity. So it can never be true. It is simply false without any contradiction. But we can look again at argument C to see where this argument goes wrong. Basically, Abhari says that we do not admit that if it is false, then it is entailed that one of his sentences is true. What he doesn't admit is basically C4. He says that we don't accept that there is a sentence that is said by the lawyer and it is true. So basically, he doesn't accept C4. So we should see what premise C4 is based on. Basically, we have two things, the rules of classical logic and Tarski and truth schema. But Abhari doesn't say anything about, violating one of the rules of classical logic. Basically, it seems that he has never said anything to say that I don't accept one of the rules, like principle of bivalence or principle of non-contradiction or something like that. So the rejection of C4 must be relied on the rejection of T. So basically, it seems that what is Abhari denying is nothing but the truth schema. And so, what is Abhari's alternative for T? Abhari in many different places has considered and accepted the correspondence theory of truth, and the idea that he basically, in many places, he explicitly says that he accepts that if a sentence is true, then what that sentence says is the case, and vice versa. So he accepts the general idea that we have behind the Tarskian truth schema, which is the correspondence theory of truth. But he doesn't accept that this general idea can be captured by Tarskian truth schema. I mean, by the schema which says that for every sentence, that sentence is true if and only if that sentence. So what is Abhari's alternative for Tarskian truth schema? Actually, the question that we should ask is that what are the eligible candidates that we can consider as the alternatives, as Abharian alternatives for Tarskian truth schema? Such an alternative must satisfy some conditions. First of all, it must render the liar sentence as a simply false sentence. Second of all, it must allow us to derive the falsity of the liar sentence from its truth. In other words, B must hold. Third, the argument C must be blocked. In other words, it must block the derivation of the truth of the liar sentence from its falsity. And finally, it must guarantee that the truth of the liar sentence consists of, or as we will see, it's the same terminology for saying that it is equivalent to the conjunction of its truth and falsity. So two things here may come to mind. The first candidate is a Bradwardian candidate, as it is discussed in Stephen's excellent works. The first option that we can suggest is that we accept that for every sentence, that sentence is true if and only if things are as that sentence says them to be. But we can also add a closure principle according to which for every sentence, if that sentence says something and that thing entails another thing, then the first sentence entails the third sentence. Basically, the truth schema would be something like this, that for every sentence, that sentence is true if everything that is said by that sentence is the case. And we have this closure principle that if something said by X and that thing entails another proposition, another sentences like Z, then X says also Z. But the problem is that if we accept this truth schema, and if we replace this truth schema with T, then what we have at the end, based on a bit complicated argument that again you can find in Stephen's 2008 paper in the book about his proposal for a new solution to the liar paradox based on Bradwardian's insight. We can see that the truth of L is equivalent to the conjunction of its truth, falsity, and some other things. So basically, this is not something that Abhari wants to say. Abhari wants to say that truth of L is equivalent just to the conjunction of its truth and falsity and nothing else. he doesn't want to say that the truth of L is equivalent to the conjunction of its truth, falsity, and some other thing. So therefore, if we accept the Bradwardinian candidate, then what we have is that the truth of L entails the conjunction of truth and falsity of the liar sentence. In other words, the term consists of must be read here as a conditional, not as a biconditional. But this is not supported by our textual evidence, because on the one hand, the terminology that is usually used for conditionals in Arabic text are coming from the root lazama, yalzamu, istilzam, or something like that. And ibaratun an, the Arabic term that we have here, is usually used for equivalence, not for just conditional, but for biconditional. And there are places in Abhari's text in which we can easily see that what he means by the term ibaratun an is basically the notion of mutabaqat or correspondence. So he says that its truth consists of its being corresponding to the false thing that is both true and false. He says that basically the truth of the liar sentence corresponds to the conjunction of its truth and falsity. So basically what he wants to say is not just the conditional, but also biconditional, which is the same notion as a correspondence. He says that for the liar sentence to be true, it needs to be in correspondence with the conjunction of its truth and falsity, the conjunction of its truth and falsity, and it's impossible. Therefore, this sentence is false. So the other candidate that we have is the Buridanian Albertian candidate. Again, we can preserve the general idea behind the truth schema that for every sentence X is true if and only if things are as X says them to be. But we can add that for every X says of itself that it is true. If we add this additional, supposition, then the alternative truth schema that we have would be something like this. For every X, for every sentence X, the truth of X is equivalent to truth of X and X, the conjunction of the sentence with its truth. And if we replace T double star with T, then we will easily see that the truth of L is basically equivalent to the conjunction of its truth and falsity, because from T double star we can conclude BA1, and then L can be replaced by the falsity of L. So we have what Abhari had in mind. But the problem is that unfortunately we know that this alternative truth schema has some problems. It's a very weak truth condition, and it cannot be considered as an analysis at all, because we have the truth on both sides, and therefore we have kind of circularity here. And again, Stephen has criticized this schema very well. And so we have a dilemma here, which can be shown in my last slide. But before that, I want to say that, okay, it seems that according to our best textual evidence, Abhari's solution looks like Buridan or Albert of Saxony's solution. But he hasn't explicitly mentioned that he accepts a truth schema like this. But it's interesting that in later Arabic Persian tradition, we have some figures that they explicitly mentioned this truth schema, and they have accepted this truth schema. One of them is Dawani, the figure that actually David Sanson yesterday talked about. He says that, as I showed, what is signified by a declarative sentence is relating the relation between the subject and the predicate of the sentence that is itself signified by it, i.e. the sentence, to the truth. Basically, what he says that a declarative sentence signifies two things. One of them is the relation between subject and predicate, and the other is the relation between this relation and truth. So basically, a declarative sentence, on the one hand, signifies the relation between subject and predicate, and on the other hand, signifies the relation between the whole sentence and truth. So a declarative sentence says not only itself, but only its truth. And I think it's interesting. This is not something that I want to argue for, but I guess that this is the imitation relation that we had yesterday. And this is the correspondence relation that we had yesterday. I mean, a sentence signifies two things, according to Dawani, and one of them is the relation between subject and predicate, which is related to the notion of correspondence, and the other is the relation between the whole sentence and the truth and the predicate of truth, and this is the notion of imitation. But I don't want to argue for this claim, but this is something which comes to mind when I was listening to David's excellent talk. And finally, what we have is a dilemma. To have a non-fallacious reading of Abhari's solution to the liar paradox, we should consider it in the context of a truth theory that is not developed by himself. The most plausible candidates for such a theory are the following. On the one hand, we can read him as a proto-Bradwardinian, then the truth schema would be more plausible, but the textual evidence that we have is very weak. On the other hand, we can read him as a Buridanian, proto-Buridanian Albertian, but in this case, we have a very strong textual evidence for that. But we know that the truth schema, which will be produced by this way, would be less plausible. So basically, in understanding Abhari's solutions, we are dealing with a dilemma. If we understand him as a proto-Bradwardinian figure, then we are contradicting the textual evidence. However, if we understand him as a Bradwardinian, then his solution would be more plausible and more powerful. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Lots of interesting material there. So we're now open for questions from the audience. And unsurprisingly, David is first in the queue.
This is a lovely paper, and the paper that you referenced from us. I mean, we were stumbling through it, trying to figure it out, and watching somebody working in so much more depth on it is great. I wanted to ask a question about that last slide that was about the pros and cons. But before I do that, I want to admit that I think when we wrote that paper, we were reaching for the question of whether or not what we saw in Abhari had any interesting connections to the solutions we saw in the medieval period. And we were, I think we meant to be shining a light towards a cluster of views, but not doing anything as precise as I think what you're trying to do, which I think it's good to be trying to do something more precise here. One of the reasons why I was attracted to interpreting Abhari as saying something like, more like the Bradwardian idea, was because to the extent that he gives us any argument for his view that I could find, the argument was, well, look, if it's true, then it has to be both true and false. And it almost reads as though he says, look, if it's true, then it has to be both true and false. So don't you see that its truth just consists in its being both true and false? But the only way that argument gets off the ground, it felt to me at the time, was if you thought that noticing that that what it said required it to be both true and false was going to be enough to make it the case that its truth consisted in its both being true and false, or something like that. So if we had the Bradwardian idea that a sentence signifies not just what it appears to immediately signify, but everything that entails, then that kind of argument for Abhari's view can get off the ground. If it turns out that has further consequences that Abhari wouldn't like, so much the worse for Abhari, is a thought. Though I like your other idea, which is, no, if you had the more restricted thing, the Buridanian thing, then he could avoid those bad consequences, but of course run into some other bad consequences. So I was wondering, anyways, that's just a thought. I'm wondering if you have a sense of what Abhari's reasons are for thinking that that something like, I realize he doesn't give us either of these truth schemas at all, so we're just trying to tease out. But because I think you've read more of the texts than I've read, and I think you've read them more carefully. So I was wondering if you have sense about that.
Thank you. It's, I think everybody accepts that a sentence is true if and only if everything that is said by that sentence is true, is the case. But the problem is that some people, like for example Tarski, he says that a sentence says only one thing. Bradwardian and Albert and Buridan, they want to say that a sentence says more than one thing. But what is that? What are those things that are said by these sentences? Bradwardian would say that everything that is entailed by this sentence is said by the sentence. Buridan and Albert, they would say that no. The only thing that are said by this sentence is the truth of that sentence and itself. So in a sense, Abhari agrees with all of these three figures, and you are right that Abhari wants to say that everything that a sentence says must be the case if we want that sentence to be true. And the lawyer sentence says something more than just its falsity. To this extent, we agree, But after that, the problem that we have is that how we understand the phrase that the truth of the lawyer sentence consists of the conjunction of its truth and falsity. As I read your paper, you also translated, ibaratun an as is, which is a biconditional. You have translated it as just simply is, and you said that the truth of the lawyer sentence is the conjunction of its truth and falsity. So you agree again with me that it's we have an equivalence here. You didn't say that you didn't translate, for example, Abharaton and as just the truth of this sentence entails the conjunction of its truth and falsity. So we should have a truth schema that satisfies this condition. If we have a truth schema which says that the truth of L merely entails the conjunction of its truth and falsity, but it's not equivalent to this conjunction, then this truth schema have no textual support. And I think that is the case for Abhari's text. And this is why I said that, okay, it seems that he is proto-Buridanian because he understands the notion of Abharaton an as a biconditional, not just as a conditional. But he doesn't say more than that. And I agree that Bradwardin's solution is more powerful, but I don't think that it is something that is supported by the text.
All I was thinking was that there's a trade-off. I mean, there's what the text says, and then there's what little reasons he gives in support of what he's saying. And so one interpretive way of trying to fill out what he might mean.
Yeah.
The other interpretive is to think about the. But I agree with you about the. Yeah, I agree with you about the textual argument.
I think that the text is closer to Buridanian reading than Bradwardinian reading. That's my claim. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I can take the next question. I thought of an issue with, I think it's slide 20. Some time ago, I was thinking about how to compare Bradwardin's solution with Tarski, and particularly his condition for truth with what Tarski does. And hopefully this can be done without a whiteboard. The Tarski condition says, for a theory of the predicate T to be a theory of truth, it must entail every instance of the schema T of S, if and only if P, where what replaces P is the translation into the meta-language of the sentence that replaces S. And I thought, actually, that fits quite well with what Bradwardin does, because, of course, Bradwardin will say that when you substitute the liar for S, and then want to substitute a translation of S into the meta-language for P, you have to include all the other things that S means in order to give an adequate translation. And so we get a scheme somewhat similar to what you have, or possibly identical to what you have at the top of slide 20, which is else true, if and only if, else true and else false, and all the other stuff that L means. So, good. So far, so good. And then you say, but actually what Abhari wants to say is the second one, and he wants to get rid of the conjunct R at this point. He doesn't want to be committed to all his other stuff. Well, if you adopt the principle that from the impossible anything follows, and accept that true L and false L is impossible, then the right-hand side of the second scheme entails the right-hand side of the first scheme, and clearly the right-hand side of the first scheme entails the right-hand side of the second scheme, just by conjunction elimination, and so these schemes are actually equivalent. And so nothing here shows that there's anything resulting from this proposal that Abhari might object to.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Yeah. So what I ought to argue is that these two schemes are equivalent.
Okay.
Because their right-hand sides are equivalent. And clearly the right-hand side of the first scheme entails the right-hand side of the second scheme by conjunction elimination, by simplification. But the right-hand side of the second scheme entails the right-hand side of the first scheme because the impossible entails anything, and the right-hand side of the second scheme is impossible.
Yeah.
Now, of course, one way out of this is for you to tell me that Abhari would have no truck with from the impossible anything follows. That would be a good answer. But apart from that, I don't see anything in the first scheme that Abhari can object to if he really wants a second scheme, since they're equivalent.
Yeah. It's true that if we follow, some logical, for example, deductions, then we can show that from the, for example, right hand of the first scheme, we can conclude the right hand of the second scheme, and as you said. But the problem is that for Abhari, the first question is that what the truth of the liar sentence consists of, and this is something that I think it's not. This is the first step that he looks at it for the correspondence. He doesn't want to say that, okay, we have the truth of the liar sentence, which is equivalent to this, and then from this you can conclude some other things, and you can say that, okay, these things that we have obtained based on some arguments is actually equivalent to the truth of the liar sentence. Basically, I agree that formally these two things are equivalent to each other, but this doesn't mean that the truth of the liar sentence corresponds to the conjunction of its truth and falsity. Do you know what I mean? It's.
May I help here? I think
yes, so someone else is coming in.
Saying is what we know from various different modern logical systems, where there is a context to what you can and you cannot prove from it. And he's saying the two contexts of the top one and the bottom one are not exactly the same, and you can't just mix them together and do a proof, as Stephen was trying to do. And from what I heard, he's probably right. But it needs examination. I mean, Stephen is giving him a challenge. He has to say something about it.
Yeah. I think the difference is that you in the first case, in the Bradwardinian case, you start by saying that, okay, what is the truth of the liar sentence, and then you say that, okay, the truth of the liar sentence consists of everything that is said by that sentence, and everything that is said by that sentence is its truth, falsity, and some other things. But Abhari says that no, it doesn't say it's truth, falsity, and some other things, whether or not those other things are logically equivalent to the conjunction of its truth and falsity. The only things that it says, it's truth and falsity, and no other things. Even if you can show logically that they are somehow equivalent to each other, even in the case of Bradwardine, as for example in your paper, when you say that this sentence is entailed by the fact that some sentence is said by a sentence is something, the fact that that sentence is entailed by that sentence is another thing. Because everybody accepts that from a sentence there are many sentences that are entailed. but this doesn't mean that they are all said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the basic difference between Tarski and Bradwardine is that Tarski, of course, accepts that there are many sentences that can be entailed from a sentence. But Bradwardine says that, okay, if we see that there are many sentences that are entailed by the first sentence, then all of these, entailed sentences are actually said by our first sentence. So the notion of saying and the notion of entailment for Bradwardine are the same thing. But for Abhari and for Tarski and for Albert are not the same.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you.
Yeah, you have this paper of your lecture, Mohammad, is
yes, sure.
Of logic, but you may, I think, in response to what Stephen was trying to do, you have to say something in the paper. It's not published yet, is it? It's just accepted. Also.
It is.
It is published. But in that paper, I have mentioned this thing that saying and entailment are two different things. I have referred to this last point that I made.
Actually, it connects with modern non-monotonic logic. Yeah, where I mean, never mind the technical thing. You go to the airport and you see a list of flights.
Yeah.
And you ask, is there a flight to Timbuktu? If it's not in the list, you say no. But that's in the context of lists of the airport. I mean, if you ask somebody, are you sure? Ask information at the airport, and then they will do, yes, there is one, but it's not up yet or something. So again, there are two different contexts. Or if you go to a pharmacy and you say, can you give me a statin? So the guy goes and says, we don't have here. And you look at the guy, and it's a 13-year-old kid that is just substituting. So you will not take his word. You'll say, in this context, maybe he doesn't know where to look. And you say, why don't you go and ask if you have something in the stockroom or something? It all depends on the context. And that's exactly the answer. They have two different contexts.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Oh, David has a finger. Is that still to go?
Looks like Manuel has a question.
Okay, Manuel. Can you unmute yourself?
Congratulations, Mohammad. Very interesting, your paper. It's a brief question for clarifying my ideas. The relation between truth value and facts is you can see difference between medievals and Arabic treatment to the question, because for me is more Platonic vision in Arabic logic. The facts and the truth value look like separate or more separate than medieval logic. I want your comment about.
You mean that truth values and facts are more separate?
Yes, the existence, the true value in Arabic, in particularly in Abhari solution, look like the existence look like independent for the facts, because the same Orash sentence could be true and false, and this is is a not contradiction. Is the sentence the facts that the sentence true.
I think he doesn't say that it's not a contradiction. He says that, okay, if the liar sentence is true, then there must be a correspondence between this sentence and a contradictory fact. But there is no contradictory fact, therefore this sentence cannot be true. So the sentence is false.
Okay, if the sentence is true and false, it's false.
He doesn't say that the sentence is both true and false. He says that if the liar sentence wants to be true, then it must correspond to a conjunction of facts which are contradictory to each other.
But I refer to this corresponds to contradiction.
Yeah, but such a correspondence cannot exist. Therefore, the sentence cannot be true. Therefore, it's false. It doesn't mean that the falsity is correspondence to contradiction.
Okay, does not exist in the world.
He says that falsity is the non-obtainment of the correspondence with contradiction, in a sense. It's impossible to be in correspondence with a contradictory fact. Therefore, it's impossible to be true for the liar sentence.
Okay, with the word, I question about the relation the truth of the liar sentence with the contradiction.
That's very interesting, because it means if you change the world, you change the logic. And this is
I mean
modern view doesn't think like this.
You mean that if we change the world in a way that in which we can have some contradictory facts?
Yes. Something is born that in the way we look at it is contradictory. That would be a contradictory fact. Or maybe God will do this on purpose. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure that if someone accepts that that there can be some contradictory facts, then I don't see why that person should have a problem with the liar paradox at all, because he or she can accept easily that it's a sentence that is both true and false. If contradictory facts can exist, why we cannot have contradiction in the level of semantics?
Yes, contradiction facts do not exist, but look like as exists the contradiction. The contradiction have any type of existence. Yes, it's not only the truth value of the sentence. Maybe it's ontological hard, but it's my impression. Than that medieval logic. No. But I don't know.
Thank you. Okay, well, we seem to be at last straying into metaphysics, if not theology, and as arts people, we're not allowed to do that. So thank you again. Is it Mohammad or Saleh you're known as?
Usually people call me just by Saleh.
Saleh. So thanks, Saleh, for a very stimulating talk. Thank you, everyone, for your attention and your comments this afternoon. And I hope to see you back here again tomorrow at 2 o'clock British time.